Hey, welcome. I have another interview for you guys that I think you are going to absolutely love. This is another, I guess, episode of Geek Private Practice, and today we have Mr. Mark Davis.
Hello, thank you for having me. Love to be here.
I am happy to speak with you because uh, I I don't know. I think you started following me first on Instagram,
I
and
think
then I
so.
name of your practice, and I was like, yes, uh, alchemy therapy. Like, how cool! Like, okay, so I had this sort of like um my fantasy, I guess, it's just magic. Like if magic could be real in our world, that's the one, or like if anything could be real in the world, that's the one thing that I would want for us to have. And I think alchemy is sort of like one of those words that in my head it immediately like goes to like, oh, books everywhere, and there's like cool science experiments and wizards and magic and stuff. So like I will definitely reach out to you for you know therapeutic services just based on the name, but I am completely biased. Um,
No, 100%.
before
I mean,
before we geek out about the things that I would like to geek out about, let's start with your origin story. Let's get to know you a little bit better.
sure. I feel like I've always been a geek. I've always been, always been to these kinds of things, comic books, anime, um, you, any cartoon you can think of. Like, I remember, just as a random example, the X-Men cartoons from the 90s or Ben 10. I fucking always love these things. And then, yeah, Spider-Man, Batman. Remember reading those comics, loving them, and I don't know, something that always about those things that just spoke to me and just continued to speak to me. They never waned. So I just felt like, I don't know, I always loved them. They never went away. Just kind of, I don't know what the word is, penetrated into my soul.
Did you always have like a group of friends that was like also geeky, or is it something that you kind of had to hide
Oh
away
no, 100.
sometimes?
I definitely have friends that are geeky. My two best friends are like since first grade, actually. Same best friends since first grade. Super geeky. We were those guys who during the playground on the playground, everyone was playing sports. We were playing whatever fantasy thing we can as whatever characters we can. Someone and we had this imaginary world. We were like we either be working together or fighting against each other, and we would be from different worlds. Like one person would be from Avatar, one person from Dragon Ball Z. Like just because it was just our fantasies running wild, just who we always were. We were always those kids.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't have that, and I don't think I realized I was a major geeky nerd until I was almost an adult, or I was like a teenager. Because I grew up in a small town, and that's not something that you do. Watching cartoons as a teenager is not cool. Although apparently, as a 10-year-old, watching cartoons is not cool. I had a client tell me that once, and I was like, I'm an adult and I watch cartoons. What do you mean
Yeah,
it's not cool? It's the coolest.
can
uh,
escape from reality.
yeah, but apparently kids these days don't think that's cool anymore. Do you have like a specific sort of fandom that you had since like childhood?
Ooh, a specific fandom I've had since yes, Dragon Ball.
Ah, okay, okay. I just really remember my grandma. Like that was one of the first sort of like cartoons or anime actually that I was introduced to. Back at that time, I was still living in Mexico, and sometimes when the cartoons would come on, I remember my grandparents saying, "Oh, why are you watching those devil cartoons? They're flying. Why are they flying? Like that's not a good thing." And I was like, I didn't. I was like, I don't know, 5 or something, so I didn't pay much attention to whether like why it didn't make sense that they were flying. It just it all makes sense in my
It was
head.
cool.
And yeah, I was like, it's super cool. um do you still okay, okay, hold on. This is slightly something that, or maybe I didn't quite prepare you for this one.
That's fine.
But okay, so one thing that I've heard recently, because my brother is also and his friends, they love Dragon Ball. And
Hey,
one thing that I heard quite recently is that the fandom can be quite toxic.
yeah, but this is true. This is definitely true. But I feel like that's true with every fandom that gets large enough. Like, I think most recent memory, like let's take Critical Role for example. when it first started out, the fandom was awesome. It was so loving and accepting and, inviting and all that stuff. And as it grew larger, toxic people come in. I mean, it's math, it's statistics. As the numbers
Mhm.
grow, the likelihood of there being toxic people is going to grow too. So I don't think it's a matter of the content, the thing. I think it's a matter of the size of the fandom. It's just the statistics of it.
That's very true. So I like watching Trash Taste. I don't know if you heard that podcast,
No, I haven't.
but it's it's really not very informative, but I love watching it because they're just so funny. And all of the hosts or the co-hosts, they're supposed to be sort of like the one of the first like YouTubers that like talked about anime online, but the podcast is like very generalized. And sometimes they do talk about anime, and that's one of the things that they were saying. So now with One Piece, the audience sort
Hmm,
of grew because we have like the live action now, so that's like a different
right.
sort of group of people that got interested in it. And also, like, I feel like maybe it's just people keep moving towards it because it's been a thing for like 20 plus years or something. So yeah, like it was bound. I mean, okay, I started reading it, and at first I was like, yeah, it's so boring, it's so weird. And like there were so many times when I started reading that I had to like forget what physics or reality or anything possible was, because I was like, oh, you can chop a wave in half with like a sword. Okay. And now I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yes.
It's funny you say that because
Cut a
these
mountain.
exact it's funny you say that because these exact same friends that like the geeky ones, they're also at least in my opinion, they're certified geniuses. They are fucking brilliant, like science, math, all this stuff. And they ruined movies for me because whenever we go watch movies, and it'd be like either an explosion that's going through a tunnel, or when you're jumping out from a someone's jumping out from a hotel on a mattress and they land in water. It's like, yeah, physically it doesn't work that way. I'm like, shut up, let me just enjoy it. You don't gotta, they're like Neil deGrasse Tyson, where they gotta like say like, yeah, this doesn't actually work this way in reality.
Like, okay. The one exception that I will have for that would be Mythbusters. Because that
Fair.
was super entertaining. That's when, yes, you can ruin the movie for me. Because you're
Yes, but you know what
entertaining
you're
me.
going in for.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and one, one, this is maybe it's just me, but one thing that I realized too, just in every fandom in general, is that there's always people that forget that reality is a thing. So like,
Mm,
movie studios, money and time and effort and like,
right.
like not wanting to the actors to like suffer any injury is a thing. So, it's not going to be quite the same as you expected it to be, or like how it's written in the books or in the manga, or, you know, in an animated cartoon as opposed to like a live action. I think we
Right.
tend to forget that, yeah,
No,
sometimes.
100%. Because I guess some people expected, hey, technology and CG has gone so far that we could totally make this thing that happened in the anime or the manga happen in live action. Totally. When, like, not exactly. Not unless you want it to look like a cartoon. Not really. Or unless you want the CG to look bad or very obvious. No, not really.
Yeah. I'm not very much of a details person. If it kind of looks okay, that's fine by me. I'm like just, looking at the big picture. And a lot of the things is like a lot of the times I hear people complain about sort of like, oh well, in the live action, there was this like frame of the scene that it looked really weird, or somebody was making a funny face. Um and I was like, I didn't even notice any of that. It was flashing by. It was like an action scene. I didn't notice. Most of us didn't really notice. But I guess that's the pros and cons of like, having the internet. We can all communicate, and we are able to do this because can you remind me where you are at? You're currently located right now?
I am in Long Island, New York.
Okay, yeah, so complete other side of the country, and
Yeah,
yet we're still
literally
able
the
to
exact
talk,
opposite
right?
side.
Yeah. So that's the amazing thing about it. So, do you have any new fandoms that you discovered quite recently, or like you're
Uh,
like trying?
so this one's a little bit embarrassing that it's relatively new to me. So don't laugh, don't hate. Avatar.
Uh, the
The
blue
Last
people.
Airbender.
Or the
No, Last Airbender.
Oh, okay.
Within the past, like, year, yeah.
Well, welcome to the family.
It took me
I
so
made
long to get to
my
that one.
cameras, you can't see it, but I have the flag over here. Yeah, that's one of, like, my like, you mentioned Dragon Ball, like, you've seen it, like, since you were a kid, and I
Mhm.
think for me, the one that has persisted for so long has been Avatar. Like, I had a couple of years where I would just rewatch for the past few no. I mean, pretty much every single year, I rewatched the whole thing over again, and now I'm rewatching it with my brother, and we're doing, like, a podcast, like,
Mhm.
episode by episode, and I still laugh about it, like, I still love it, and it's just so amazing, and, like, just the more I learn about mental health, the more I'm like, "This is a genius show, whoever created it was fantastic. Because there's so
Oh
many
my god.
amazing things to get out of it."
I loved, like, those I feel like there's, like, you can d dissect Zuko till the he death of the universe.
Yes. Actually, the one that I'm kind of surprised we didn't, or as mental health providers, maybe as geeky mental providers, we didn't really, like, look too much into. It's actually Azula.
Hmm.
Because I feel like she's super interesting. Like, I love her as a character, not necessarily anything that she did, because it was all super mega evil, but, like, she was, like, 14, and she was, like, this genius, and she was able to accomplish so much, and all she wanted was, like, to be a part of the family and, like, hang out with, be treated the same as Suko, which is,
Right.
kind of not something that could happen because they have different personalities, they have different needs, um, and just the way that they tended to communicate was completely different, but it's, yeah, I'm surprised we don't talk about her more.
If I had to guess, and again, it's complete guess, I would say it's because her psychology is more obvious than Zuko's. I think that's maybe why
Mm,
people don't touch on it as much. Like, oh, it's the child genius or the favorite of the parents, and okay, things didn't go the way she wanted, and she had a mental breakdown, and so that's why I don't think she's touched on as much as Zuko because her psychological journey was more obvious than Zuko's.
in my head, it was actually the opposite, but it's I mean, I might be totally biased
Like I
because
say, a
Suko
complete
is one of
guess.
my favorite characters because, I felt like,
Complete guess.
for Zuko, because we saw so much of him, and everybody basically just sort of analyzed him. He analyzed
Mm,
himself so much, and we
yeah.
don't get that much from Azula. We don't get a lot of her, like, inner thoughts, or maybe that's what makes it a little bit more difficult because we
Oh,
get so much from Zuko, like so much information from Zuko's story, and we don't get enough from Azula. Um,
ooh, you know what else
and
is the
even
difference between the two? You know what else is the
yeah,
difference? Zuko, throughout most of his journey, had a therapist alongside of him. Azula did not.
yes. That yes, and that's why I'm like, "Well, we need to be the one therapist for Azula because she needed it, clearly, come on. That's what we're here for. Zuko's fine, he'll be fine. He had Uncle Iroh, who's
Right. I
awesome."
mean, unfortunately, who could have been her therapist didn't really play out. I mean, uh, you know, her mother, which I mean, I guess that goes into a whole other thing. Her mother being her therapist in a way, or could have worked out, but their whole dynamic. Other than that, yeah, she didn't really have that.
You know what we should do? We should make a video where we just psychoanalyze her because I think it would be
Yep.
so interesting, just to talk about. And that's one of the things. Maybe this is just me, but you can correct me with all your wisdom and experience. I think when we talk about, like, people who tend to, or people who are experiencing depression,
Mhm.
or who have suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation, or harm themselves in some way or another. Um, and they have everything they could ever want.
Mhm.
There's this sort of expectation of society of, like, well, why are you doing this? Like, you shouldn't do that. And I feel like maybe that's sort of like some of that bias or some expectation kind of goes to Azula because she basically, her and Suko were like complete opposites. Whatever Suko needed, Azula had, and whatever Suko had, Azula needed, right?
Mhm.
Because I could sort of say that Suko didn't need Uncle Iroh as much as Azula did because
Mm.
Zuko was able to, it might have taken him more time, but I think Zuko was able to understand his path and sort of like be a good person. And Azula didn't really quite have that, I felt like.
Mm. I can definitely agree to that. I think they were both angry in their own ways. I think they
Mhm,
both needed Iroh, but only one of them got it.
mhm.
Azula's Iroh was her father, and we saw how well that played out. So I'm saying the person she had by her side, advising her and helping her to grow, but helped her to grow in that direction as opposed to that direction.
Mhm,
Um, but I definitely see what you're saying that, what one had, the other needed. Zuko needed accomplishment to feel competent. Azula had that in spades. Um, Az- Zuko had people, or at least he grew to have people around him that he could trust and that he liked and that trusted him, that liked him, and really, and not like just fake, like Azula's friends. And then she found
mhm,
out that they were fake, and that, as we saw, led to her was, I think, maybe not the first domino, but definitely a deep domino in her breakdown.
mhm. Yes, yes. We should probably talk about something else because we could just continue talking about Avatar for
I'm
ages
totally
and
fine
never
talking
get
about
tired.
Avatar. I'm down.
No, but okay, so I want to know a little bit more about what it is that you do in your practice. No, wait,
Sure.
can we start with the name? How did the name of your practice came to be? Because I still can't get over it.
Sure, yeah. So, the name of my practice is alchemy counseling, and the way I came about that was it was a long process. So, I'm very CBT and REBT, rational motive behavior therapy oriented. So, I work with my patients in that kind of a mind frame. I also use some solution focused therapy in there, and so a lot of what that entails is gaining mastery over yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your behaviors, things of that nature. So initially, I was thinking, hey, I want to call my practice mastery counseling. And people told me, no, that name sounds dumb. I'm like, okay, fine, fuck it. So let's go. So I'm like, let's go with other ones. I'm like, huh, what would sound good? What are some good geeky names? What about dragon counseling? I'm like, not really. Okay. Silver Quill. Well, we got some copyright issues with D&D and Magic the Gathering on that one. It's like, okay, we're
Oh,
going through a bunch of different names that we went finally got to alchemy counseling. And not just does it roll off the tongue, but it fits therapy so well because alchemy is all about combination and transformation and change. And that's basically what therapy is about. It's about every person being able to change. The thing I love to say is, we are all the alchemists of our own world. So we can turn the lead of depression that we deal with into the gold of a good life.
wait. Do you have a, oh no, what's it called? That you know how some brands have like a
A
phrase
logo?
that's associated with them? No, not a
Oh,
logo.
oh, oh,
The
oh, yeah. I think. Oh man, I forgot the name. I know what you're talking about. The name of
like
it
the
is
tagline? I don't know
tagline. That's it. Yeah.
or something. Yeah, do you have one for your practice?
Not officially, but I do have a a favorite thing that I like to say, which is I want to help you not just to feel better, but to get better. I want to actually help you to change and transform and become that person through your own mental alchemical process into the person who you want to become, that golden individual.
Yeah, because you were saying something earlier, and I was like, "Whoa, that's a great tagline!" And it was like take charge, or like, oh no, I totally forgot now. Great, so helpful. I hope that you found that extremely helpful.
I wanted to
It
turn
credit me with.
the depressive lead into like a golden. I wanted that to be my tagline, but it was too long, too wordy, it didn't work well. So I'm like, you know what? I can't think of anything better. So I'm like, you know what? Forget it. It's not really needed. People will get the tagline in working with me. I
Wait,
see you're very still thinking about
I'm still thinking about it because it was
it.
so good. I'm like, wait, hold on. Because you said, and now I'm like, wait, hold on. Let's stop this video so I can rewind and say what you said.
Yeah.
I think it was something along of like, be the alchemist in your own life,
Oh yeah,
or
yeah.
like
That we're all
use
the
alchemy
alchemists of our own
something.
worlds,
Yeah.
our
Yeah, yeah,
own
yeah,
inner
yeah.
world.
That. And I was like, whoa, that is so cool because it just makes it seem like you at least in my head, like when you say that, and I'm like, yeah, I have the power to do cool things, you know?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. And like, so one of the things that I like to do, because I have the memory of like a goldfish, thank you, ADHD, is that
Hey, same
I
here.
need I need something interesting and shiny to like keep me motivated to do things or to like remember.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I started doing with my sibling is that, you know, the sometimes we use in therapy the idea of the spoon, like you have so many spoonfuls
Oh,
so you can
spoon
get.
feeding.
Yeah. So I was like, spoon sounds so weird. I don't like that. And then I was like, you know what I really like? I like wizards and sorcerers. And you know what they have? They have spell slots. And then
Mm.
so whenever I run out of energy or like I just don't feel like doing anything because I need something else, I just tell my brother, "Nah, I'm running out of spell slots today." Or I ask him, "Are you running out of spell slots?" And that's sort of like our keyword to like communicate like how we're feeling socially or like your social uh
Yeah, I
sort
do
of.
that all the time, depending on the people's, level of geekiness and nerdness, like if they know any anime, because like, okay, Dragon Ball Z, Ki, oh, Naruto, Chakra. Like it's always the same kind of, it's the same idea.
Oh my god. I didn't even think about that. I was like, I love this one. I will use this one forever.
It
But that's
works.
actually that's actually true. Because you know what I was thinking about too? I don't know if you've ever seen JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember I made a post about is it Hama or Hamon?
come on.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's so cool." The concept of it like was really cool, but I didn't think that we actually have that sort of like energy or the idea of that energy like pretty much in everything.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so yeah, that's amazing. Okay,
it
now
works. Whatever works for somebody, whatever. Basically, but one of our jobs as therapists is, okay, what do you resonate with? Okay, I'm going to use that against you.
did you always use like elements of geek culture in your practice, or is that something that you started doing recently or?
I would say relatively recently. Like I did it even in the beginning because I didn't know how just how prolific knowledge of this stuff was. I'm like, okay, especially with the adults, they probably don't know it as much. But as I'm more and more people are getting into geek culture and anime and it's becoming more and more popular. I'm like, okay, yeah, within like a certain age range, up until a certain point, it's pretty normal. I could probably say this and they'll know what I'm talking about. After a certain age, it's like, okay, now I'm rolling the dice.
Do What is the youngest, person that you typically work with or the age range?
Typically, yeah. So typically, I'll work with anyone 15 and up. Generally, my specialty niche is like 15 to 30. So I love working with teenagers and young professionals.
Oh, okay. Because like, now like, it just like the one, time where one of my, kiddos was like, "No." She's 10. And she's all like, "No, cartoons are not cool." And I was like, "Okay." And then I was trying to like connect with her, and I was trying to be cool and hip therapist. And then I was like, "Well, okay." So I was trying to talk to her about school, and then I was like, "So, you know what do the cool kids be doing these days?" And, I had no idea any of the things that she was talking about. So do you find that in your practice, like, when you work with, like, your youngest, individuals, they tend to be a part of fandoms that you are not familiar with?
That's a really good question. Sometimes, yeah, because something I've noticed because I remember once reading this a while ago, and I think it might apply to this as well. Is like with trick or treating kids, little kids love trick or treating, and then they get to like 10, 11, 12, 13. It's like, oh no, trick or treating is dumb, and then that might last until they're like 16, 17, 18, and they're like, no, trick or treating is fucking awesome. I want to do that shit again.
Yeah,
So I think it kind of fits the same thing here as well.
that's true. Now I'm thinking about what are some of, like, the newer fandoms or, like, social media, because I I'm in my 30s, and I started, uh, streaming on Twitch.
Okay.
Yeah, so I started with Twitch, and before then it was TikTok, which is, depending, every social media is can be helpful or harmful depending on how you use it.
Hmm.
But now I'm wondering if, your younger, um I was gonna say kiddos, but they're not really kiddos anymore. Your younger teens have like a different platform that they're talking about, or like different fandoms that they're more interested in. I know that there are some. I feel like that are sort of like making a comeback. I feel like some fandoms sometimes make a comeback.
Yeah, so it's mostly TikTok, and especially with the younger ones. And not to veer the conversation in a particular direction, but the fandoms, if you want to call it that, that I'm seeing the most of, it actually is dependent for my male and female patients.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so for my female patients, there might be like, either makeup artists or things like that. Or other what's the fan? There's a fandom that I know that they're a part of also, just it's not coming to me right now. It'll come to me in a second. But for a lot of my male teenagers, the fandom, if you want to call it that, is a lot of what's been popular as of the last couple of years was like red pill stuff. That's the fandom they're a part of. A lot of the
Wait,
younger
what?
teenagers, the red pill stuff, like Andrew Tate and stuff like that.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
know now.
but we're talking like nerdy stuff. Like, I haven't really seen that as much of fandoms, really.
Okay. But sometimes I hear actors talk about how, oh, they made a movie, and usually the people that come and geek out and they're like, oh my gosh, like my favorite movie that you did was like, something that they did like 20 years ago. And sometimes they're like, yeah, sometimes it's like young kids that are like approaching me and like, how did you even know about that movie? It was like so old or whatever. And I feel like there's some fandoms that sort of like have their cycles where they get old and then they have a new season or something cool happens or nostalgia. I feel like it's a big thing that's
Maybe Star
happening.
Wars, because there's always something new with Star Wars coming out.
That's true, that's true. Yeah. Wait, I'm totally, like, just geeking out with you and, like, not even asking you
Please,
about your practice,
I'm
which
fine with
that I
that.
was.
I'm loving this. I'm having a lot of
Um,
fun.
wait, so okay, so, we established that your name is amazing and we love it. Um, so what is it that you do? What kind of population do you work with?
Yeah, so like I said, 15 and up, usually 15 to 30. I specialize in working with depression, anxiety, and specifically those suffering from suicidal ideations.
Okay. A question that or something that I have been thinking about more often now because I'm trying to promote my own sort of like nonprofit is that they often say, oh, well, you're trying to market something or create like your own space. You have to find the niche of what you like. And then I was like, okay, well, I like mental health and I like geeky things. So that's what I'll do. But how did you come about finding that particular niche for like that population?
Yeah, so just for my own thing, like, I like working with younger individuals because, and specifically, I like the teenager to young professional range because in my opinion, that is like the Goldilocks zone. Because what I mean by that is, so I used to work with kids, little kids, like when I used to work in a clinic,
Hmm.
and I learned that's not for me. I'm
Hmm.
not much of a play therapist. I don't really have the patience for play therapy. I want to do talk therapy.
Okay.
Excuse me. And little kids, especially the younger you get, they don't really do talk therapy as much, but teenagers definitely do. And older individuals, like I'm talking like 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, obviously the older you get, the more stuck in your ways you become. So
Mhm.
people who are, teenagers or young professionals, they're like in that Goldilocks zone where they're still learning, where you can talk to them, you can have a conversation, and they can learn and change and almost like mold themselves. They're still in that process of being able to be the alchemists of their own world, to become that person who they want to be. They're not too stuck in their own ways, and they can actually talk through it.
I think it's fascinating how everybody has sort of like a different perspective or different takeaway from working for different populations because
Hmm.
that same reasoning that you gave about like young adults and like young professionals I have about kids. If
Mm,
because so for me my favorite character is Loki,
mm,
and specifically how he was portrayed in like the Marvel sort of universe. And because I always thought if he received therapy when he was little, this none of this would have been a problem, you know?
mm.
And so that's why I always like love, well, I mean, I'm a big child myself and I love toys. Sometimes more than the kids, which is weird because the toys are for kids,
I don't think it's
but I'm
weird.
like,
I
look
don't
at
think it's
this. And
weird.
they're like, yeah, whatever. That's
Bro, in
adorable.
D&D, we have minis. I don't think it's weird.
That's true. No, but those are cool. Those are adult toys. Expensive. um Yeah, but, yeah, it's amazing to have, sort of like a different perspective of everything. Because
Mhm.
I don't know about anybody else, but when I was in school, uh taking on clients that had a history of suicidal ideation, or even any sort of like chemical dependency. I was like, I no, thank you. I don't know what to do. I like very uncomfortable. Like eventually, like I got over it, and I learned, but um, i- again, it's the whole you really enjoying to work with, or discuss a topic that most people will shy away from.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, like even when you were in grad school, like substance abuse and suicide, which not more often not, but it happens quite often that those two will go together. One may lead to the other,
Mhm.
and make the other worse. That a lot of people are like, no, I don't want to touch that. Suicide. Oh man, no. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I put the idea in their head? What if I say the wrong thing and they end up killing themselves? What if something happens? I'm taken to court and I lose my license, or I have some kind of punishment. And all those are incredibly, incredibly valid fears. I wouldn't take that away from anyone. But at the same time, these are things that people are dealing with and struggling with, and they need competent clinicians who will be able to not just face it, but then be able to help them. And so these people, the ones who are thinking of killing themselves, they are some of the people who need help the most. And if too
Mhm.
many clinicians are too afraid, who do they go to? And especially when you take other things into account, like money and insurance, and that just add that onto a whole other bunch of things that can make mental health care less accessible. It You're just adding more difficulties, more blockers in their paths. It's actually for that reason, I guess, to deviate for just a half a second. So I'm actually writing a book called The Alchemy
Mm.
Approach to help clinicians, specifically clinicians, to be able to work with suicidal patients. Because I want people to be able to go to clinicians. I want them to seek therapy. I want therapists to not be afraid of it. I want them to be able to have someone walk in and either have no anxiety or just very little anxiety and be like, okay, what you're saying to me, I understand it and I know how to work with this. I know how to get you to not want to kill yourself. And so that way, clinicians will be more competent and will have less, hopefully. My ultimate goal is to make a dent in the suicide statistics that we see every year.
And that's amazing. I think, that's one of the reasons that I love collaborating with other people, because I have my own sort of like passion project that I love talking about, but I know everybody else does too. And they're all super important because, yes, definitely. I live in a very rural, middle of nowhere community in you know what? Every time I say middle of nowhere, I always think of Courage the Cowardly Dog, where like it's his house, like in the absolute desolation. Like that's kind of what I picture my town in California. Like
Return the
obviously we have
slab or something.
we have more people, but that's just always what I imagine. Um, but yeah, we definitely don't have enough providers, and we have a large population that is primarily Spanish speaking, in this area. And I think one time I did like a quick Google search, and there was like maybe 3 or 4 providers for like 4 different cities, like that
Oh,
are
wow.
sort of like nearby. And I was like, oh, this is ridiculous.
And this is in
And
California.
yes. No, okay, so I studied in San Diego, so it's a huge city, and because we have so many, I don't know if it's only because of that, but we have so many schools, that are training mental health professionals in like all kinds of like different levels. Um, so we have a lots of different programs, lots of services that are offered in like all those areas. And I came back here, and then I was like, I always knew that we didn't have anything, that it was a boring town, um, but then I came back and it was glaringly obvious. Like, I mean, even our like library is so sad. It's so little. And like I love books. And I'm like, I probably have more books than the library somewhere in my house.
Ay,
And
ay.
then I'm like, that's sad. And I'm like, okay, we need more events, more things for kiddos to just engage with each other and like talk, and
Yeah,
more providers definitely. So yeah, this is amazing, because it is
thank
something that
you.
is it can be quite scary to do, especially what we see in the news, about like
Mhm.
school shootings, and how more often than not, there's like, well, they were seeing a therapist, but I guess the therapist wasn't good enough, or like, what was the therapist doing that this still happened anyway, and then so there's a lot that we need to take into account. Um,
I never liked that. People seem to like therapy is like magic. Like there, it's not. We're humans. We try our best, but there's there's so much that goes into it. One, it's obviously the patient also, like, they have to want it also. They have to work with us. If they're going to work against us, it's not going to work. But even if they do want to work with us, you know, I guess to use psychiatry as an example, you know, if someone's in an abusive household, right, and they're depressed, and you give them an antidepressant, a lot of good the drug's going to do if the environment is still as bad as it is. So the same thing is with therapy. Like, if we can't either help ameliorate the environment or make things better outside the therapy office, there's only so much we can realistically do. So then to blame, like, oh, I guess the therapist wasn't good enough. Like, yes, I feel like that's unfair. Like, what about the other aspects of this person's life?
Yeah, so I actually have a couple of panels where we talk about sort of like the behind the scenes of like a therapist's life. Like, why are some of the reasons why therapy is so expensive? What are some of the reasons why we can't see you as often as we want or whatever, you know?
Mhm.
Because there isn't enough information about that. And that's why, like, stereotypes or um unrealistic expectations sometimes happen.
Right.
Um Wait, I was gonna say something and I totally forgot. Great. Okay, okay. So one thing, I totally stalked your website, and one thing that I saw on there is that you particularly have a section discussing men's issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I feel like I don't have enough information about this area particularly of
Yeah,
men's.
sure. So, I mean, again, not trying to deviate the conversation to one place, but it is important. Like I was talking about, a lot of these teenagers and young people, like the red pill, entertainment, and all of that. Like, these people don't come from nowhere. Like, there is a mental health kind of crisis with men that these kinds of that these people who red pill, whatever, are preying upon, in my opinion. And
Mhm,
a lot of it comes from the expectations that men either have or feel that they have from
mhm,
whether it's their family, whether it's society, whether it's people they're trying to want to get into a relationship with, or just trying to court in any other kind of way. There's so many expectations. Again, these could be real or perceived, but they have real impacts on men. And they, especially when you feel like, hey, you can't talk about it, you got to be a man, and you have to, I even put on my website the way I say you have to have a body like He-Man, the charm of James Bond, or the money of Tony Stark. Like, have those kinds of expectations is ridiculous. And a lot of men think that they need to. Those kinds of beliefs lead to very self destructive feelings and also self-destructive behaviors, and also other destructive behaviors in some scenarios. So that's why I feel like there needs to be a focus on issues that are specifically relating to them as well.
yeah, you know what I heard. It was like a TikTok video, I think.
Hmm.
uh, but there was a person that was talking about that there was a research study that was done about the difference between the the life expectancy of a woman versus a man,
Hmm.
and that the finding was that women often have a community around them and men do
Hmm.
not.
Right.
And like they just kind of went on and like gave more details about it, and I'm like, it's so true, because it is so very common for girls to have like girls night or girls day or go shopping together or like
Right.
just gossip,
Right.
but for men that's not something that is seen as okay. It's not something that most men, I would say, are comfortable even with doing, because either they were never taught to express themselves or to even identify, sometimes I feel like, their own emotions or their own needs. It's sort of like, I do have those three that you mentioned. Like, do you have the body of Hulk? Do you have the money of Tony Stark? What was it one?
The charm of James Bond.
The charm. Yeah. So if you don't have those three, like, what is it that you have to offer? What is your worth? And we don't
Right.
often talk about that. And even when it comes to, for example, um, uh, representation in the media, or talking about weight loss, or eating disorders, we tend to focus more on women because it's more common, but also men experience it
True.
as well.
Yeah. The same is true with DV. Again, we focus almost completely on women because, let's be real, it happens the most with women, but it also happens now and again with men. And that's also one of the reasons I think it's important to have therapy for men. So, like, when you have a man who's dealing with an eating disorder, with domestic violence or sexual assault or anything like that, that they can feel that they can open up about it, they won't be judged, and they can work through it the same way that a woman would with her therapist.
You kind of mentioned a little bit about how, you use, uh, geek culture
Mhm,
in, or elements of it
mhm,
in your practice. Um,
yes.
ho okay, I don't think I've ever asked this before, but did you notice a difference? Like, from before you
Hmm,
start using it to when you start using it? Like, in how they
um,
interact with you or how they
hmm.
therapy?
So, what immediately comes to my mind, 'cause I'm assuming what you mean by that. Immediately what comes to mind is have you ever read the book by, Mary Pfeiffer, The Letters to a Young Therapist?
No.
It's really good, I highly recommend it. So one of the things that she's talking about in her letters to this young therapist is the use of
Mhm,
metaphor. And I feel like and I use metaphor all the time. I feel like it's a great way to help get a point across, to help people understand. And
mhm.
I think using video games or anime is a great way of getting this point across. So, like, to give two examples. So with video games, specifically RPGs, you talk about different stats. Like, okay, yeah, you're going to the gym, your strength's really great. But how's things going with school? How's your intelligence stat? How is your charisma stat? And okay, so this is maybe where the issue is. Let's work on building that up. Maybe that's what's going on here. Another one could be when it comes to goals. Like, yeah, we have this ultimate goal, but we have different steps. And I use like, you know how in anime there's an overarching goal, like, yeah, Naruto wants to become Hokage, but there's all these arcs in between. So right now, and all these arcs eventually get him to achieving his ultimate goal. That's what we're going to do in therapy. We have these small goals, but they're all building up and all on their way to achieving the overall goal that you started therapy with when you came to see me.
I feel like I should be taking notes on this because I really like that idea of like, because I think I've seen it quite often now where they're like, oh, I'm in my growth era or in my something arc, in my villain arc.
My villain,
Um,
right? Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, oh, that's cool because one thing that I so before I started sort of like learning even about video games, I did a collaboration once, and apparently, if you play Sims, please correct me. Like you see the stats, right? Or for most video games, I will say you see the stats, right? Like above the character.
Well, if you mean like their health bar, yeah, usually,
Yeah.
or their level,
Uh
yeah.
yeah. And then I was like, wouldn't that be so cool if you could see like someone's energy level or like someone's like level of like, socialization energy that they have or social energy that they have. um like just
Mm,
displayed like all the time, so you're kind of
mm.
like aware of what they're experiencing. And I
I'm
think
scared of it. I'd be scared of that actually.
to see it all the time, yes, I can
Well,
see
not
like
just
how that
that.
could be
Well,
bad.
not just that. I mean, like, 'cause I'm afraid of that because well, listen, if we could do that, that'd be awesome. If everyone could do that, I feel I'd be very scared of that because I feel then people with bad intentions would be much easier to take advantage of people because when they see a certain status low.
Yeah, I never think about people with bad intentions because I never think about that. But yeah, I mean, okay,
Well,
let me
that's how I see that.
backtrack.
I try to see things on
it,
both ends. You know?
it would be cool if at the very least we could see our own.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, and then that way you can sort of like learn about your needs or like teach kiddos. It
Mhm.
would be so like it would be like such a concrete thing, right? Oh, you know what it makes me think of? You know that I don't know if you've seen Lilo and Stitch, but
Yes.
that drawing that Lilo does of him where he's like, well, this is your badness level and this is your goodness level. And we need to work
Yes.
on that. And I'm like, yes, that would be so easy if like we just had like pictures like that, like of or different levels or like or different stats like in D&D, so we can like, oh, okay, I need to work on this or like this is what I need. Because sometimes we just feel bad and we don't know what we need. Like like nothing
True.
sounds good.
True. And but also sometimes we see things that aren't there. So, like for example, if let's say someone's uh Constitution scores at a 14, and like, oh my God, my conscious scores at 14, and X, Y, and Z has it at 19. Oh my God, I'm such a loser. Or even like, oh no, it's at a 16. And for most people, 16 is pretty good, but like, no, that's not good enough for me. A 16 is not good enough. And so they down themselves because it's not high enough. So, and because we already have that, we just don't have numbers attached to it. Like, oh,
Mhm.
actually, no, we do. A lot of people see eating disorders, for example, with the scale. Right there's your numbers. Like, oh no, you're at a healthy weight. You're fine. No, no, look at me, I'm ugly. So people, so I think it would just be another avenue for much of the same.
Very true, very true. Man, we does everything have to have a con? Like, these are just cool things. I just like the good bits of it, not the bad, horrible things. But I mean,
I
and
agree.
again, I think everything is sort of like that in life, right? Because I always sort of advocate for how helpful social media can be because it has allowed me to, make connections with people, meet people who otherwise I would have never had a conversation with because
Right.
they are so far removed from anything. I've learned so much. And every time I learn something from like an anime or something, I'm like, and they say you can't learn anything by watching TV. You can learn so much by
Oh,
watching
you can
TV.
learn so much. Oh,
Yeah.
there's a reason, no, there's a reason why people love anime because it really does teach you so many things. Like especially what's shown in anime, especially the protagonists normally are people who don't give up. They're tenacious, and that's a great thing to have. And just going what you said before, like oh, why does everything have to have a negative? I'd rather just the positive. Um, I I mean, first off, it makes the good all the sweeter. But I tell my patients all the time, you know, uh, the currency for happiness is pain and sacrifice. There is almost nothing in this life that's worth having that comes easy.
I think this aspect too of maybe it's just sort of like a Western society kind of thing where it's like
Mhm.
we love labeling something good and something bad.
Tell me about
Right?
that.
Because it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing or a good thing, right? So for
Mhm.
example, when you were saying we don't have numbers attached to things, we do because I immediately started thinking about social media because then you
Mm,
have people thinking, oh, I don't have enough likes, I don't have enough follows,
that's such a
I
good
don't have
point.
enough subscribers, right?
It's a very
And
good point.
I'm like, well, is it a bad thing that you don't have enough? Like, is it a good
Right.
thing that you don't have enough, right? I think it's like a lot of it is a matter of perspective, right? Because you see a client coming in that's like 5 years old, I would be like, "So adorable, come on, let's go play," and you would be like, no, thank you." Right? So, like, we have a
Right.
different perspective, we have a different thing that we, like, that's our niche that we are, capable of doing and we're interested in. So maybe those numbers are letting us know that maybe that's not for us, right? Or maybe
Mm,
those numbers letting us know that or that are giving us that opportunity for us to reflect on, does this number really matter?
right.
Or like reflecting on what is it that I really want from this platform or from these views or like, from doing this. Um, I think it's if we don't immediately place a label on it, maybe we can get so much out of it.
I completely agree. I mean, I think you make a very good point that things inherently aren't good or bad. We make them so.
Hmm.
So, like, you're saying, like, the likes on Instagram, for example, like, is it good or it's bad? It's neither. You decide if it's good, bad, or neutral. Is it bad? Like, oh my God, it's so few, and so now I'm going to, shit on myself. Is it like, oh wow, I got 17. That's way more than I expected. Now I'm happy. Or it's like, okay, I got some likes. That's okay. I'm okay with that. You decide.
Yes. So my Instagram account is like a business account or whatever that means. But
Hmm.
it allows me to see how many people saw the post and like what the interaction was, whether they left a like, whether they interacted with it. Because most of them you can sometimes you have to like flip through it to see
Hmm.
like the rest of the post. And I change my perspective to, instead of looking at the likes, I look at how many people it reached. Because that
Mm,
lets me know if it's like something that's working with the algorithm or like maybe like the hashtags were helpful or were not helpful at that time. That way I make sure that more people reach it because um I don't, in my perspective, it was always like with the more likes the better, right? Like that means people enjoyed it. And then my brother was like, I never like anything on social media.
mm,
And I was like, "What?" And then he said like, "Yeah, I never do." And then I was like, "Oh, there's people who don't like to like things on social media,
yeah.
but they still get benefit from it, from
Hmm.
from seeing a post or watching, they may still
Right.
like it." And then that's why I was like, "Oh, okay, I had to change my perspective on that."
Exactly. 100%. And you're right. It's there's some people who just watch it and just scroll by, and because I guess we have this idea, or yeah, those of us with businesses who post things, this idea like, oh, if someone's likes this thing, they're definitely gonna like it. I mean, why would they not? No, they to them, it's just another post on social media that they just scroll by, just like all the others in the sea of posts. And it's something for us to remember.
Yeah. And there's other things too that give us value, right? Um,
100%.
being human and being alive. That's sometimes that's just like the bare basics of that.
Right. And, being, giving to others, being of value in some way, not just to yourself, but to any other individuals. Like, I guess to take the, I think it's a phrase from the, oh my God, what's their last name? The Green Brothers.
Oh yeah.
Hank Green, him, like, so, decrease world suck. Just doing that, and even the smallest way, that's something right there that would make you a good person.
I think one thing that I've been sort of contemplating a lot about is the meaning that we have ascribed to things, right? The meaning we have given to success. What does it
Mm-hmm.
mean to be successful?
Yeah.
I always had my own idea of what it meant to be successful. And again, it wasn't until I started talking to my siblings that I came to an understanding that everything I considered to be successful, he was like, ew, yuck, I would never. And I was like, what do you
Yes.
mean? And then he said, like, well, for me, success is the complete opposite of what I wanted. And it doesn't in my head, I'm like, but you'll be miserable. Like you won't be successful, you won't
R-
do anything in your life. And then he
Right.
said, like, no, I'm
Exactly.
so happy with this.
But
And I'm like,
that's so important.
never.
But that's so
Yeah.
important because you're right, and that's a big thing we do in therapy. It's like I'll have patients who came like, okay, what's your goals for therapy? Oh, I want to become more successful. Oh, I want to be happy. And I'll say, and the exact words I'll say to them, I have no idea what the fuck that means.
Hmm.
What does happy mean? What does success mean? You need to give me something specific that we can work towards. What does success or happiness look like to you?
Yeah. Because we have an idea of what it is based on eh,
Yeah.
the media.
Based on what we think it is, but you're not me and
Mhm.
I'm not you.
So, I have the tagline that I kind of want to have for my own nonprofit is reframe and reenchant your life, because
Mm,
I love magic, and because I realized that a lot of our problems comes from how we think of something.
yes,
If we were just to reframe that thought a little bit, like a lot, it would solve a lot of problems a lot of the time.
it
So I
does.
was like, okay, let's start with that. Let's start with changing the way that you think about something and adding a bit of magic to your day, right? And
Hmm.
to me, that means geek out. What is it that you love? Sports, chess, books, whatever it is that you are into, add
Yeah,
that to your life because we all need a little bit of magic in your life, right?
do more of it.
And then now I'm thinking that the same sort of applies to the topics that you often discuss in your therapy sessions, or I imagine, discussing death, discussing
Yep.
self harm, discussing
Hmm. Yep.
how horrible the world is.
Oh yeah.
I think we have to reframe our thinking, because one thing that I love that you said was that oftentimes the people that have that suicidal ideation, it's because they need help, right? And maybe they don't know how to ask, maybe they don't know how to seek it, maybe they don't know what kind of help they're in
No,
need
you're
of.
right. Yeah, because that's the thing about most of the time. Obviously not 100%, but like 95+% of the time, people who are suicidal don't want to die. They want the pain to go away, and they believe that suicide is their best option to make that happen. And often what they need is to be shown that no, this is not the best option. That one, there are other options, because sometimes they think that options don't exist. But then two, not only are there other options, but these are better options because you could get rid of the pain and still live. And not just live, but you can live a happier life. And it might not be the first option, it might not be the second, maybe it's the fourth option. But we can try them at least and get to the one that works for you. And I have yet to have a patient that's like, yeah, these 15 options that are on the table, not one of them is working. It's never happened. I don't think I've ever even gotten to option 10 before we found the one that works for them.
Okay. Now, would you be willing to give us a sneak peek of like something that's in your book?
Sure. So, so there's two pieces to the book. Well, I mean, there's a few pieces, but I think the big pieces for therapists and clinicians. is the assessment aspect and the intervention aspects. Which one would you like to hear?
Well, let's see. I feel like pretty much every place that I've ever worked at, they always go over the assessment. They always have their own sort of like thing that you
Mhm,
use for that, but
mhm,
it's not very often that we hear about the interventions. I would like to
yeah.
hear the interventions. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a number of them. I even gave them all little, snazzy names in the book. Um, I think the number one thing I do all the time is I will lean into the hope. So, because the thing we want to avoid, especially with people that are suicidal, is nihilism. The last thing you want is people to be like, "There's no point to anything. I might as well just kill myself." You want to lean into the hope. What is going on in your life that is that is working? Also, for example, here's a favorite of mine, one of my favorites. You tell me you want to kill yourself, and yet you're sitting in front of me. Why? The fact that you're sitting in front of me, that tells me there's at least a part of you that wants to go on living. Can you tell me more about that part of yourself? And then from there, they start to recount why they're still living, what's going right. And once I have that, gotcha, bitch. We're gonna hone in on that, and we're going to lean into that hope.
Wait, I am a genius. I just thought of this question. Okay, is there a because I know there has been a lot of controversy with certain shows, how they portray depression and
I know what you're gonna
suicidality.
ask.
Is there one that you're kind of like, yes, this is something I would recommend people watch, or like look at the growth that the person went through, maybe as
Mhm.
inspiration for their own life?
So for someone who is who is dealing with suicide, no, not unless they're of like really low lethality. If they're like a medium or higher lethality, I'm like, no, I'm not showing anything dealing with suicide. Last thing I need is to because yes, in the end they show growth, but like in the middle, I don't need you ending it in the middle. Last thing I need.
Mhm.
If they're like of low lethality, then maybe I would think of something. There's not a particular show that I can think of that really deals with that. For some reason, Zuko's coming to mind, even though I don't think he ever dealt with those thoughts. But like that kind of a thing of like losing everything, but then coming out on top in the end with everything you ever could have wanted, more or less, is pretty much it has connective tissue to the idea to suicidal thoughts.
Well, it I'm an expert in Suko.
Yes.
Self-proclaimed. But, for him, it was I guess it was that reframing of, like, he lost everything he thought he wanted, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't what he actually needed or what he actually wanted, because he
Hmm.
already had that, and then so once he learned to value that, then it completely changed his life around. Okay.
Right. But like something like
Okay.
13 Reasons Why, no, fuck that show.
No, no, no. Yeah, that's what I was like, "No, no, no, not that." But if, let's say, there is an executive producer that somehow found this podcast and this
Sure.
interview and is like, "Oh, well, I'm thinking about, doing a show or whatever," what would you highly recommend that they include in
Therapy.
every trial? Like, in the right way, right?
Yes, that they are seeing a therapist, that they what I would want them to include, I would want is uh that there is another character, whether it's a teacher, a friend, a parent, a sibling, doesn't matter, someone who catches on to the signs of it, that they're thinking of suicide, even though it was never exclaimed. They go up to the person, they ask them, hey, what are you feeling okay, yada yada yada. And that they, even when the person, obviously the first off says, no, I'm fine, yada, whatever, you don't have to worry about me, they keep on to it. They don't let up because they care about this individual until they realize, listen, I've noticed X, Y, and Z, kind of, I guess, highlighting the things to be on the lookout for suicide. So I might be thinking about it. Here's what I thought. Be honest with me, either bro, be honest with me, student, kid, whatever, what's going on. Then they open up because they feel they can open up to that person. Say, okay, you know what? Listen, how about we get you a therapist? I'll even go to the first session with you so you're not alone. Stuff like that. So they can have someone talk to them and then show them the therapist, like, okay, what's going on, what's making you feel this way. Let's use some interventions to help you gain that insight and maybe even find something that you're missing that you think is not there that actually is there that we can help you to not feel this way anymore.
One thing that I just thought of, again,
Hmm.
because I'm a genius, is that I have been concentrating a lot more on building a community because, like I said, we don't have enough providers here. So sometimes having that support from another person, even if they're not fully trained, it means so much, right? Like I lost track of how many times I heard my brother say something or give me a piece of advice that I think about for weeks. And then I'm like, you know what? Thank you so much for saying that. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, what do you mean you don't remember this thing? That was a massive impact in my life, you know?
That happens to us all the time
And
as therapists.
yes. And then so like one thing that I would also like for producers to include is people either having or not finding or not having that community, right? Because
Mm,
that's especially like it's so as providers we kind of discuss how sometimes we're like there's so much that we have to include. I'm not really trained on this. I don't know how to talk about these topics with someone who is, you know, suicidal. And
mm,
as a person who's not trained at all, who's never really had to deal with having a friend say hey, or like discovering that their friend is, you know, harming themselves or is having these thoughts, it can be like a complete like what do I do? And I think sadly for most of us is to, oh, it will be okay, you'll get over it, or like just don't be sad anymore, right? And then like
right.
move on because I don't know what else to say.
Right, and that's a big thing in my book, well, not big thing. It's something I mentioned that like don't do platitudes. Like if those kinds of things worked with suicidal patients, we wouldn't have suicidal patients. So, and that's part of the thing is oh, what do I say? Just say something, because what the research shows is that doing nothing results in dead patients. So even you don't have to be like an expert, and you don't have to be a part of the American Association of Suicidology to know what you're doing. Just talk about it and be straight up about it. You're not going to put the thought in their head. No one, it's never happened that someone's like, huh, you know what? I never thought about suicide, but that's a really good idea. It doesn't happen. So
Mhm.
the idea is, talk about it, be straight up and blunt. Don't beat around the bush. Are you thinking of killing yourself? How? In what way? When? Talk about it.
What would be, or what are some of the, I like the number three. What would be
Mhm.
three things that you would recommend for people to either ask or do when they have either a loved one or a friend or a coworker that might be thinking about suicide?
Number one thing, bring it up. Say something. Don't like I said, don't beat around the bush. Hey, I noticed X, Y, and Z. Whatever's making you think that way. I am. I'm only coming up to you because I'm concerned, yada yada, because I care about you. Is this something that you've been thinking about, or something that has been on your mind at all? Is something going on? Do you want to talk? First off, bring it up. Second off, be that listening ear, and then, excuse me, sorry. Third off would be to refer them and be willing to go with them if they really need somebody to go with them to the proper professional, because they don't need you to solve it. They just need someone to notice it and to be that first point of contact towards that help. And if you don't feel confident that you either know anybody who can do that or exactly how to help them, there are crisis hotlines that you can call, 988. You can call the 988 suicide hotline. You don't have to be the suicidal one. You can be the third party and say, hey, there's someone I know that I think is suicidal or is suicidal. Uh, A, what can I do to help? B, are there any referrals you have that I could give them, a therapist or whatever, that can help them? And C, I don't know if this is every crisis center, but I know there's a lot of them that are, that if you're willing to give them the information, they'll give them the call, they'll check in on them, and they'll offer them the referrals and the information, the education they need to make sure. And if that crisis counselor, who I hope is a well-trained one, feels like, oh yeah, this person is of high lethality, high enough that they're going to kill themselves, then they might be like, okay, yeah, we're going to have to send the ambulance or whoever to take them to the hospital just to make sure they don't kill themselves. So those, I guess, I know that was like 10 things, but all in encapsulation of those main three things.
As you were talking about that, I think one thing that we just in general humans we're not um aware of or trained in or like we hardly ever talk about, but is creating a space for people to feel safe
Hmm.
talking about things with us. right? Whether I mean, this applies to anybody. It would be like parents to their children's, or to their partner, or to like a family coworker, like whatever. Like it just applies to every single facet of our life. Sometimes we don't create that space, right? And like I had a
Right.
one of my coworkers one time, we were discussing something, and I had this expression on my face, and then they were like, "Are you mad?" And I was like, "No, I'm just focusing. Like this is my I am focusing, and I'm trying to pay attention, right?" And I'm thinking face. But they thought I was upset, and then I was like, "Oh,
Mhm.
maybe I should like fix that, or like just mention it. I'm just thinking. This is my thinking face." But like, what would be some of the things in an ideal world that you would want everybody to know or to practice to be able to create that safe space for people to
That
talk?
is a big question. Ooh, of all the options, which one to touch on? The one thing that I would want everyone to be able to practice, um, to be able to create that safe space for people to open up and be able to, I guess, feel safe enough to talk about these kinds of things.
Okay, there is a right and wrong answer to this, and I have two. If you don't say the two that I'm thinking of, you're wrong. Okay, go.
I'm
No,
trying
just
to
kidding.
get,
I'm just kidding.
no, no, I'm trying to get a 0% on this test here. That's the goal. Uh, this is my thinking face. Um, honestly, I would say non-judgment. Just, yeah, just say what it is. Like, you can express surprise without judgment. So, like, I'll have patients who tell me the wildest shit, and I'll just go, "Oh, okay." I'm inside, I'm like, "Holy fucking shit," but you can just raise your eyebrows and go, "Oh, okay." There's no judgment there. It shows a surprise, like you didn't know, but that's fine. They didn't expect you to know. So I would say that if you're gonna be judgmental, don't show it.
I was in between non-judgmental and listening,
Mm,
because um, uh, even I don't really listen sometimes. And I remember there's like the concept of like active listening, right? Like, or just
yes.
nodding your head, making eye contact, like doing all these things. And I think just in general, that's something that we don't get prepared in school for. Like, I
Nope.
wish I could just like write um or rewrite the things that kids need to like achieve academically before
Mm,
moving on, or what they need to be taught, because I think this is highly important. I think we're taught to listen enough to follow instructions, but not to actually like listen, right?
mm, right.
And the one thing, I'm not an expert in this, I just kind of remember I saw a video about how in Japan, the first, I want to say 5 years or so, it's completely dedicated to, like, learning how to take care of yourself, learning how to socialize. Like, that's sort of like what they focus on, not so much academics. Once you're older, then it is academics. And I was like, that's actually a great
Mm,
idea. 'Cause actually, I think that video, it explains something about how even in the, I don't know how I feel about it, but the idea was to allow like kindergartens to like fight and resolve their own problems by themselves,
mm.
which part of me is like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. I don't know if I would allow them to continue fighting, uh,
It sounds like
like
trial by combat.
physically fighting, but I think that sort of like the idea is there, right? Because I think we've seen, or it became like a thing in like social media where like you see these cute little kids that are like walking by themselves to like the bus stop or like going to school, and it's like really really safe, and they're like independent, and they're able to like go and buy groceries like at 5 or 6 years old. um and I think there's like skills like that that we, because there is no parent manual, sadly, like a lot of these
True.
things get missed because we didn't learn it in our childhood, right? So how can we
No, it's
teach it?
true. Well, it's not just that. I mean, part of the reason there's no child manuals because there's no such thing as a standardized child. That's part of
That's
the reason.
true. That's true.
If, you know,
Yeah.
if every child was the same, if they had the same genetics and they had the same environment, they had the same everything, then yeah, there'd be a manual. And that's that's part of it. I mean, we part of our thing as therapists is we need to take everyone as they come. You know, different life experiences, different genetics, and what they're predisposed to, different environments, all these kinds of things. We need to take all of that into account when we're working with them.
So we talked a lot about mental health, which obviously we both love and can continue talking for ages. Now
Please.
let's talk a little bit about business. What is the one thing that completely surprised you about like starting your own practice that you were like, I have no idea what any of this is?
Uh, in the beginning, everything. In the beginning,
I feel that, yes.
yeah, in the beginning, everything. So I consider myself lucky that so when I was doing my practicum and internship, I had a supervisor who I loved working with. Very similar personalities. She helped me to grow a lot and become the therapist I am today. And so after I was done working at the clinic, you know, getting my hours towards licensure, and I was ready to open my own business, she's had her own for a while. I'm like, you know what? Let me hit her up and see if she can help me. And she helped me every step of the way, answering all of my questions. And I had a lot of them, and a lot of them were stupid. And she gave me the patience of make answering all those questions. So I was lucky to have a mentor. And I tell my patients all the time. Also, one of the most important things you can do for yourself. I don't care what business you're in or what field, get a mentor. Find someone who knows more than you in this area that you can learn from, and then you can ask questions to, and they'll have good answers for.
I went through this phase where I listened to a lot of TED Talks, and the
Hmm.
one that I remember, I do not remember the name, I don't remember who gave it. The only thing I remember is that they said that they highly recommended that you do the rules of like 30. So you 30% of your time with someone who is sort of like your equal in terms of like knowledge and like life experiences and stuff, and someone who is sort of like more experienced, has more knowledge than you. That's the other 30% of your time. And then the other 30% of your time is with people that you have to teach all these things to, that are either
I
younger
like
or
that.
don't have the experiences as you, because it gives you a different perspective. And I was like, that's so true. Because I spent for the past, I would say 7-ish years or so, most of my time I've spent it either with my family or with someone else who's also in the mental health field.
Yeah,
So I was preparing to like reach out to like local libraries and organizations to do like free presentations for the community. I was like, I have nothing to offer. I have no idea what any of this is. And then I did my first one and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Everybody around me knows because I talk about it so much, or because they're in the same field as I am, but
yeah,
nobody else knows. And I was like, oh, okay, I do have something to offer. So like that like quickly like reframe my mind. And I think it's fantastic, like having a mentor, like spending time with people
yes,
that have already been there, is
100%.
whether it's like like a mentor for your profession, or like just in life, having that
Hmm.
uncle Iro, that's there when you reach out or
Yeah.
just hang out with. It is amazing. It is just life changing, really, I will say.
And it's really needed. You need to have that person in your corner who you can trust, that you can go to those questions that can answer them. Um, and yeah, I was very lucky to have her. I continue to have her when I have business questions because I'm still always learning different things. I mean, she didn't answer. I mean, it was not everything I know was because of her. Like I have another friend who, like I said, he's really, really smart. He helped me to figure out the money side of the business. You know, how much to
Mm.
charge, when, why, how. Um, and so, because I was underselling myself and I didn't even realize it, and he helped me to realize that. Yeah, he helped me how much to charge because I was underselling myself. And so, with his help, I was able to figure out, the proper amount to charge so that I'm able to make the amount that I should be making, and I'm actually much more comfortable monetarily now, financially, because of that, as opposed to working myself to the bone for what I was charging.
Which is really hard, I feel like, in our field, because we want to help everyone, and we understand that, people come from like different backgrounds and they have different um, possibilities of,
Hmm.
economically or whatever. So yeah, nah, it's
So
understandable. But again,
yeah,
good.
no, listen, I totally understand that. Something I said to when I used to work at a clinic. It was a Medicaid clinic for disadvantaged families. The ones that are lower SES, and something I remember telling one of the clerical staff when I was leaving was, "Listen, I feel like I did my part. You know, I gave back to the community. You know, I wasn't making that much money for the work I was doing. I feel that, and after all the education, all the hours, all the money, everything I've done, and after giving back, I feel like now I deserve to start making money."
Yes, and I will even add, not only deserve to, but need to, because student loans and, like, paying for your own housing and
Yes.
bills and stuff, like, we also need that. Um, yes, there's so many things that we could discuss. But I would like to ask you one final question. If
Sure.
somebody was interested in also having their own practice, um,
Mm.
what would you recommend that they either get training on, or something for them to like start thinking about or paying attention to, so they're ready um, for when like to open their own practice?
So I don't think you need any specific training to open up your own practice. Any licensed clinician can open their practice. Um, I think what you need to know is you need to understand money, charge how much to charge, how much things cost. You need to know you need to get to know marketing, and social media. You need to if you're going to do insurance, you gotta learn how that works and also how to get on those panels. Um, Obviously, you got to get a CAQH number and NPI. You need those numbers to get on insurance panels and just for things in general. Um, what other knowledge do you need to open up a practice? I think that it'd be a very good idea for you to find a niche. Because if you're just being general, then how do I know that you have specialized knowledge in helping me? I know you have generalized knowledge, but Dr. Sanchez has exactly the experience and the training that in my issue, I'm going to go to Dr. Sanchez. So know what you want, know what separates you from other clinicians because it is a business and there is competition in a way. So you have to be able to separate yourself so that you're attracting the right clients and the ones that you want to work with. Because if you're not working with patients that you want to work with, that is a quick route to getting burned out.
That's what I was gonna add too. Like, we were talking about like how you find your niche and how it's so helpful because you are passionate about those topics, or like working with that population, right? And then so because of that, you'll get more training, you'll start learning more,
Hmm.
you have more experience to be able to share. You'll be more, in a sense, more effective and be able to connect better with people, as opposed to being like knowing a little bit of everything, right? Or doing a little bit of everything all the time, which can cause burnout. And I would say too, um that it's okay to change, right? Like, if you find your niche and then you decide, like
Yeah,
10 years later, I want to change a little bit or do something slightly different, it's completely okay to do that as well.
yeah, yeah. You can change focuses, you can change careers. Some people are like, I don't want to work with trauma anymore. I want to start working with personality disorders. And some people are like, what, I'm done doing therapy. I want to become a physical therapist, or I want to go into be a dietitian. That's fine. Go
Hmm.
for it. We are evolving people, evolving creatures, and sometimes your passions change, or you realize what your passion was all along. And there's nothing wrong with it. Again, if it's feasible in your life, given the context, chase it. Go for it.
Yes. And if is anybody interested in reaching out for services or collaborating with you, or for a consultation, where can they find you?
Yeah. So my website is alchemycounselingny.com. You can find me on Instagram as Alchemy Counseling, or just search up Mark Davis, LMHC. That's Mark with a C, not a K. I'm also on TikTok as the Mental Health Alchemist. And yeah, those are the main places where you can find me. I also have a book coming out, The Alchemy Approach, that should be published within the next couple of weeks. If you are a clinician, be on the lookout for that. Follow me on Instagram to get updates on that. And hopefully, it will help you in order to become much more competent, much more confident in dealing with suicidal patients.
Awesome. And one thing I kind of forgot to ask you is, do you do in-person visits or virtual visits only, or a bit of both?
I I do both. So on Long Island, I have an office in Rockville Center. If you want to come in for in-person visits, that's totally fine. If you want to do virtual, I do that too. Whatever is more comfortable for you.
Amazing. Okay, so with all that information, let us know if you have any questions or any comments, or if you would like to see more of Mr. Davis later on, more collaborations. Let us know that too. All the information that we discussed today, whether it be, I remember that there was a book that you letters to a young therapist that you recommended, and all the like your website and social media and all that stuff will be at the bottom of or the description of this video. And with that, we are ending this interview. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. And yeah, let us know what you thought of it in the comments. Any suggestions, all of that. Also, feel free to check out Psych for Geeks and our social media. We are now doing Twitch, or I say we, but it's me. It's me. I've been doing Twitch streams weekly. And yeah, don't forget to reframe and reenchant your life. Bye.